All right, my end is live. I'm running my little Phoenix video. I made that. I'm very proud of myself for making this, including the music.
Hey folks, tonight I'm going to have a conversation with my friend Steve Zaralath from Connecticut, and I hope you enjoy it. We're just waiting for him to boot up on his OBS. He's going to simulcast on his YouTube channel. All right, Steve, I'm good. I'm flipping over to the main screen now, so you're coming on in black and white. There you go.
All right. All right. Hey, hey. Okay, here we are. And yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I went to the wrong screen. There we go. Haha. Setup. There. Okay, we're doing this on Skype, and so I'm going to be a teeny tiny thing in the corner. And here we are with my old friend Bruce McDonald.
What's it been? We've known each other like a decade now. I think I first spoke to you in 2014 from a Starbucks when I called into Sean David Morton's show, and you were producing, and I had just finished reading Volume 1 of Sands of Time.
Oh, cool. You just read Sands of Time with them. I thought we met right at the beginning of the station. I thought you were there sometime in 2012.
No, I didn't pop in till about 2014.
Okay, so for us, it's our decade. All right. So Bruce and I have known each other for a decade. He knows what I was like when I was horribly askew with everything in my life, but fighting the good fight in a way that...
The curious thing about that is there was a physical representation to it as well, which is also gone now in the form of like 70 pounds have disappeared, and he's a new man.
I know, right? It's you know, and it was fun when I was rolling with people that I liked at the time who like, it was just like one day we just went live, and like I had always been just hanging out like live or whatever, and just like everybody just fucking like, whoa, Steve, whoa, look at you, right? I don't know, maybe 2 weeks or something had gone by, and I had hit that pocket where all the fat in my face had fucking gone off and my tits had slendered down, so I looked like a decent formed man. And and that was the moment I was looking at myself, and you know, it's just like looks can be treated superficially, but you know, I stopped looking at myself in the mirror a certain way at a certain point because I couldn't recognize that I needed to get to know a new person.
And you feel a lot better with all that weight off you, eh?
It's well, yeah, it's I've unlocked, like I'm very fit. I'm very fit. It's not just I lost weight, I've conditioned myself. Right? People that have been following my channel so much, you know, they see like I put out kickboxing on a bag. I don't have a lot of time with a trainer as of late. Videos like that, yoga, you know, my meditative techniques and everything else. And all of it is 20 times more supercharged, right?
Yeah.
You know, and this is a combination of working with several guys that I thought were the most legit that offered services in the metaphysical realm. And it was that, and at home I had a friend who was like a fitness guy who was complete like material level, laughs at half of my spirituality, but is one of the tightest bros I got. And he helped me become a badass too, physically.
Yeah. So tell my listeners a little bit about your spirituality, which is very interesting because I guess what we could call you as a neo-pagan, right?
That would probably be an assumption that I'd imagine most people would see with me. You know, but I'm very much, I'm an animist. You know, I have a shamanic kind of practice. I don't make the claim that I'm a shaman in the sense that I had a spiritual rite of near-death experience to have like that ghost connection. But the point is that all of my intuitive abilities, I got stuff I can do on a very, very useful level for both myself and people around me. And by that I mean I'm a shaman and I'm a magus, because I can also do magic, which has nothing to do but me evoking my own power, which I can do through my discipline.
Yeah, and you're very well studied in the Norse system. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I my time at Revolution Radio, uh, eventually stumbling upon something European that made that, like, sitting there realizing, like, so what was Europe like before, like, the Christians came over and built all the big stone things and everybody started living like Monty Python's Holy Grail, right? So when was life always like that, like shit? It's just like right? That, and to find the depths of the actual answer to that question,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and for it to be completely like new territory, something personal, like, because it was just like I loved the traditional Eastern mysticism that I
Yeah.
was getting out of what American New Age had to offer at the time, and being in Revolution Radio was right in the heart and
Yeah.
soul of the most, like, from the bottom to the top kind of fucking people having the conversation that you could ask for.
Yeah.
Look at the rock stars that have been through Revolution
Yeah.
Radio. Graham Hancock. I never
Yeah.
got to interview Graham, but it's just like we were the CBGBs.
Yeah.
Of,
Great. Yeah. So Steve and I both used to work at a station called Revolution Radio. Well, I shouldn't say work. It was all volunteer, but and when it started in 2012, like, it had a really good, like, Graham Hancock, who now has a Netflix season 2 of his Netflix special just dropped a couple months ago. And I haven't watched it yet, but I heard Keanu Reeves is
Yeah.
like hosting it. So we
Saw a
were
clip.
actually on a radio station with that guy, and Carrie Cassidy was there shortly after she had left Bill Ryan and gone solo, the Project Camelot team that
Yeah.
did some phenomenal work from, let's be honest, from about 2006 to 2010. The very best stuff out there was those two together, Bill and Carrie and Sean David Morton, old hand at alternative radio. Lots of people felt that he should have been the guy who took over Coast to Coast, but he didn't get it. Sean's kind of a good luck, bad luck kind of guy. He has good luck, but he also has a lot of bad luck. Are you following the situation there at all?
Yeah, I'm friends with Sean on Facebook, so I get the updates from what is sometimes him, sometimes his wife, and it's one of the most painful things to look at, because Sean did so much study in how this medicine works, and I don't know if I can say that he's being targeted by them, and that it's just something more powerful than whatever his discipline is. It fucking sucks balls. It hurts like hell.
I definitely think he's a targeted individual, and I definitely think he's being punished for the Sands of Time books. Yeah. All right, Maestro, wherever you want to go with this.
All right, yeah. Now that you've opened up my heart center so fucking wide with the with the Sean, how dare you, sir? How dare you? All right.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Okay, so back in the day, Bruce and I had epic conversations on the round tables about the Jews.
Yeah.
And I was working at being... I put myself in this role of trying to anchor the vernacular to get the conversation bypassing the ears of fucking assholes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But you know what? That time is now so transpired that I think all context makes fucking sense to people at this point, and I don't have to fucking do that. We've never had the real Jewish conversation because I was always trying to elevate the conversation before I heard all the other idiots on the station. No offense to like, some of you guys were just really dumb anti-Semitic fucking people.
That you're absolutely right. It was just Christian chauvinism and anti-Semitism. And, just to kickstart the conversation, for me, I don't like to lump the Jews into one big group, because it really comes down to an inner circle of past knowledge and certain rabbinical lines. They definitely have a war chest. There's a lot of billionaires and trillionaires backing them. But I think about 80% of what we would call the Jewish population are as victimized by these Zionists and the Rothschild agenda as any Gentile. So I just want to get that out in front. And I've said on my show many times, I believe a Torah Jew is a benefit to humanity, an illuminated human being, if they actually live the Torah. What we're talking about here is the magical inner circles, and they exist in the Vatican too. They exist in the Mormon Church. They exist in Jehovah's Witnesses. It's that inner circle that knows what's really going on and lives off the energy and the financing of the devotees. Now, in the case of the Jews, there's such an incredible backstory there that there's an incredible gravitas for the average Jew. You grow up listening to your mother, your grandmother, your rabbis, and if you're in Israel, your school teachers, giving you this like amazing multi-millennial history that begins with the Exodus, and the world hates you, and they're so close to getting their temple and their final goal in the Promised Land, which is the temple. It's not the Greater Jerusalem project is what they're just fabricating as a bargaining chip, which they'll trade for the Alaska Mosque, in my opinion. But I just, at the very outset, before we get into it, Steve, I want to say that I don't see this as it's not the Jews, but it's definitely Jewish.
Right. It's, yeah, and of course it's the question of what of because even the context of the term Jews, as in like looking at a person and saying they're Jews, right? Apparently that's only been around for 100 years. I don't have all of that put together just yet. I just know how it kind of popped up in the colloquialisms for various different reasons, and I don't know what our relationship with Jews was in pagan times, because oral tradition stuff, there's nothing really in there. If other than your imagination saying, well, when they were talking about trolls, right? And that may be true, especially if Kabbalistic Jews are coming through and wowing the peasants with their magic. Yeah. Right. That would make perfect sense to me. Right. And much of that mythology is about the off-worlders, and a lot of our shamans in the north were picking up on off-worlder energies, and then we picked up on different ways that we describe
there's
them,
open communication between the advanced Teutonic shaman and races like the Palladians and the Nordics. Open communication. And in instances I've heard of, physical visitation, like knock on your front door, there's a Nordic there. I should mention, my listeners know, but I think I mentioned to you off air, but I have befriended a Teutonic shaman now, a brilliant gentleman in his early 80s, and actually studied in Finland, just south of the Arctic Circle, for a decade, lived with them, and he's met the gods and goddesses and all of them. And I actually just finished typesetting a book for him called Contact and Cosmology, in which he details the relationship in some measure between shamanism and the off-worlders, which is everywhere when you start looking at it. It's not just the Hopis; it's every native tribe has the star people in them. And all of this, for some reason, Steve, all of this got wiped. I don't know what big machine they got working on the moon that can just mind wipe us and make us forget all this stuff. That people could live with this knowledge for centuries and these experiences, and then it just goes away. It's like this great. It's almost like formatting the hard drive of the collective unconscious of the human race.
Well, if we lose the will to keep connection with each other, if that psychic bond is poor, then any kind of like tower moment in the tarot sense, which is also alluding to the Tower of Babel. It's the tower moment's the most appropriate reference I could make for it, is because the tower card does allude to the Tower of Babel, because it's your big deal that you're working on has been thwarted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tower had a tower moment in 2020, right? He was
Yeah.
knocked off the throne for 4 years for whatever reason in whoever's plan. Did
Yeah.
they plan to take him off and put him back on? Because then we can just move on and say, okay, that's just part of their dark sorcery, or was there a light and dark war that was happening on that level? Because because I don't believe that the politics conflicts themselves is the light and dark war. It's like a mockery. It's a mere mockery of actual spiritual war that our hearts are having against theirs.
Yeah. Agreed. All right, I'll follow your lead now that my disclaimer is out before we start talking about the Jews.
Yeah. You're because your friend that you spoke of, the Teutonic shaman, he studied in Finland, and I brought up to you earlier, even before I asked you on tonight. Did you catch anything I was doing with the Box Saga? Have you heard of the Box Saga?
I knew it by another name, but I saw that famous documentary that was done about the guy, and
who in the hell is Eeyore Bach?
Yeah, and this is another thing that comes out of that sort of shamanic tradition in that part of the world, is the passage of elaborate and ornate oral histories.
Yeah.
And the guy you're talking about is the keeper of the story, right?
Yes, he's the keeper. He's the keeper of the story. Bach is the 12th of the original families on this planet.
Yeah.
The Box Saga goes that, the sun created the planet, let it evolve, then created the god and the goddess by having a monkey and a goat have 2 children, and that it became the Lord and the Lady. That became Frey and Freya, and then they had Ra and Maya, who was the first king and queen, and then they had 12 kids, and then Bach was the 12th kid, who was the breeder of the family, as well as a story as a story keeper, and Box Saga, thus the saga of the rest of everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And so the Hyperborean kings in the Box Saga survive the Ragnarok, which is when the Pleistocene was started, which is when the paradise time on planet Earth ended, when we had our regular axial tilt, and thus no seasons, right? And we were all copper skin. This ain't got jack shit to do with melanin. So that was a one world government with one family who was like, we were all directly in some way back then, all like a family, literal.
Yeah.
But they had strict breeding rules. They had very strict breeding rules. It was a completely different way. So the Box Saga starts because the Box Saga is about, you want to know how everything started. We have to talk about how people were born and the manner in which they were born. So fertility cult. It's a fertility cult story at its core, beginning for humanity. So you explain this infrastructure, fertility cult. So Atlantis is Atlantis. All land ice in the root language.
Yeah.
And thus there were the 4 quadrants of the earth had each a quarter of this family's line in it. And then there's survivors were all of the tropical races. These are all the people that are just the tribal type people. They were the ones below the Arctic Circle that didn't get the Ice Age. They got the flood. We got the Ice Age. So we had the Fimbulvitr, which is in Norse mythos, the terrible winter, the great winter. It happened already, right? And so the Hyperborean king line survived by the grace that there was a freshwater pocket in the Arctic Circle that came in during this ice age, kept a certain part of the area warm enough to be a livable, survivable like winter.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were able to keep animals, and then they started creating agriculture,
Yeah.
domesticating animals, breeding animals out of tropical animals to be suitable. And then they had a first line of people go in and create and found the Arctic people, and then white people happened. That's how white people happened.
Yeah.
Then we got separated from the Hyperboreans. The Arctic people, we went our own way, like the way the tropical people did.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up descending from the Hyperboreans first when they were figuring out when it was cool to get the hell out of here. Right.
Yeah.
It's too much, we're going to die if we leave. They had to be there for generations, and they had to shrink it down from 12 kids to like 9. It was like 9 and 7 instead of 12 boys and 7 girls. Right. They were breeding different.
Yeah.
So anyway, long story short is one of these later lines that of children come down out of these Hyperboreans. These are the fucking elites, and they are of different types of people from up there, from the of the Hyperborean race,
Mm-hmm.
including a guy who would come down and eventually found the Jews in question.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is also one of the races that got compromised by off-worlders.
What are we talking here time-wise, Steve? About 12,000 years ago, 12,500 years ago, something like that.
Well, yeah, we're talking about, okay, history as we know it has been trying to pick itself back up since the end of the Ice Age. That's the most obvious thing when we look back at what we were doing, at least as far as northern man was concerned, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everybody else was broken off from the higher order of the Hyperborean greater family, but they still had most of the paradise. They had like rainy and dry seasons now, whoop-de-doo, right? So they just kind of adjusted.
Yeah.
I don't know where the desert comes into play other than a product of the axial tilt and the way the Earth shifted with that axial tilt.
Mm-hmm.
So at any rate, the Box Saga to me, I think, fills in a lot of blanks. It doesn't seem to acknowledge off-worlders per se, but it doesn't really have to, I don't think, and we can fill in the blanks because the off-worlders are like the missing piece for what's going on with, the primary dark sorcery running people's minds and driving their fucking spirits.
Yeah, let's start there. The dark sorcery.
Yeah,
what's your take on that?
I need water before I die.
All right, I'll carry it till you get back. Okay. So this is just a sort of leading up to the moment we're in now, and I guess how we've come to be in what seems to be a Jewish-led world. I mean, at least it seems that way if you're in the United States, and I would say Europe as well. I mean, I'm starting to see things come out of Europe now, the European Union leaders making these very, very deferential statements towards the Jews. And so you guys know my position. I think that we're being led to Noahide law, and I think this will be a great culling because Noahide law has a severe death penalty mandate. They really play that down when the rabbis are talking about this. I mean, what I was talking about while you were getting your water, about, how the background you gave is leading up to how we came to be in what appears to be a Jewish-dominated world, at least in our half of the world. It may not be in Asia, but it's definitely in our half of the world, and how it seems to be leading to the Temple of Solomon and rule by Noahide law, which the rabbis are openly talking about now, but they're not really reading the fine print aloud. I mean, under Noahide law, pretty much 99% of the people practicing religions that are not, I would say, very, very similar to what we'd call Chabad Lubavitch right now. I don't know if they'll be given a warning or be told to stop, and if they don't stop, but under Noahide law, the penalty for idolatry is death, right? So it's my belief, Steve, that we're already under Noahide law, that the...
Go fuck themselves!
Yeah, that we're already under Noahide law, and the medical regiment, because I have to be careful about what I say, but the medical regiment we're under that began in 2020 is an aspect or a precursor of that Noahide law, which is affecting the death of idolaters.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Well, that makes me think, because I mean, they probably have that. Well, there's idolatry. It makes sense in the sense that if you're watching somebody with an idol, kind of become this surrendered thing to it, right? That seems to be a thing. I grew up loving anime. Still love really good anime.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, anime cult is real as fuck.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's otaku, like being a super fan. I got my otaku moments about like my anime eras, like 80s and 90s. I'll go full otaku, right? But when I see these people that are like grown men that dress up like Sailor Moon and stuff and live in that personality, and all that stuff, I'm just like that's a different kind of idol. But guess what? Like those people, they're also IDLE. They don't have, they're not doing anything with their spirit. So it's just getting poured into this fantasy because they've given up.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. And that's one of a long list of many forms of escaping the reality we live in, which seems to be the most popular pastime of people now, right? Is escaping the reality we live in. Very few people can look at it head on now.
Yeah. And I've tried to stir people's spirits with encouragement that are like that, like to their face, like human beings standing in front of me, not like internet arguments, right? And to get the rebuke, to get the scoffing, like I'm trying to tell them to fucking break their legs or something like that. It's just like, wow, you hate yourself. I'm sorry, I can't even be in your energy, right? It's just like, I try to be a healer, and I get repulsed when people that are hurting don't want to heal. It really bugs me. It's just like I feel insulted, like a doctor would feel insulted if he didn't take the medicine prescription he gave, right? It feels like. So it ain't nothing personal, but if you're on a path of death, it's just like, you got to show me that you're off that path. Otherwise, I'm not interested, because my compassion must go towards those that are fighting for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So cue us up. Where are you at? Like, give me your take on. So you gave us the real old history, the Hyperborean kings, and the Ice Age and the Flood, which were the same thing, depending on where you were for the axial tilt, which would, I guess, what you're referring to there is a magnetic pole shift, right?
Something like that. According to the Box Saga, it was something that Udin did. So it was something that the sun did. So it would have been perhaps the sun having like changing its solar winds or something. Like maybe there's a way the sun emanates energy to the earth, and perhaps it changes the pattern and changes the angle that it wants to do that. Right? Yeah. Because that's like the Box Saga says that one day that the sun wanted to do a thing, right? Like the Ragnarok was a thing. making the first god and goddess to make the first humans was a thing that the sun did, and then the sun just stops and just goes on its regular course passively, right?
Yeah.
And so this is what the ancient Finns say we all believed back in the day, right?
So what is the explanation for why these Scandinavian cultures preserved this information so well? Just the oral storytelling and like how did they do it? Like why did everybody else drop the ball but these northern people have this ancient memory?
Well, the Arctic people, the Arctic people, like I said before, they were kind of like they got stuck up there with the Hyperboreans, right?
Okay,
Or
yeah.
they descended as a new generation from the Hyperboreans that then separated to do their own thing, but their own thing was also similar in many respects because they were still a lot closer to the original family lines the way they held it, right? So the simplest of answers is that we're we're a little bit closer to how the original family lines raised everybody. So all of that culture and tradition that comes from us Carpathian whites, not Caucasoids. We are Carpathian whites who we descended from Helsinki, from Uudmaa, and I think we went south a little bit, but we didn't settle till we popped up north into the Carpathian Mountains.
Right.
That's where we got started. So in those mountains, that's when like certain things get saved in the tradition in root language. Power, like your personal power, which has different kind of contextual references, is called Tor, Tor. Well, that sounds like Thor, and the way they describe it as a feeling, as a force that you experience, which is highly important in the Box Saga. That becomes, man. Sorry, I was supposed to be interviewing you about the Jew.
Yeah. Let's switch it up, okay?
All
All right, let's switch it up, okay? So you start your interview, man. Ask me what you want to ask me.
No. I'm kind of glad that was more like pop quizzing. Everybody go watch what I'm doing with the Box Saga. I'll be doing more of it later because I'm jumping into a whole bit on Eeyore next. That'll go for a couple of episodes. I'm still a bit on a journey of discovery myself, but all of this is very core to the mystery school I'm initiated in. So that's part of the reason why this is of high interest, because I've got several things going on to fight evil. Welcome Zaralath the Mortal and his world.
Yeah.
All right, so Bruce, let's talk about what people really need to know at this point about the Jews before innocent people get hurt.
Okay, so I will answer point-specific questions. So just ask your questions. They can be general or specific. You can start in whatever fashion you want. I have somehow become an expert in this topic. I never set out to do this, but it just happened.
Yeah. All right. So I'm remembering best I can from reading In the Light of Darkness. So what is going on in the power has that power structure do you still see it the same way you did as when you wrote it? Is the Council 300 the top of the Earth game? Is that all the Jews going on up there at the Council 300?
Well, the Jews, I would say, are a representative arm of the off-world control. Okay. And, I point this out to people and they kind of go, when they have it pointed out to them. But the uniform of the controllers is a black suit and a black fedora, very much like Max von Sydow getting out of the cab in front of the house in Georgetown in The Exorcist in 1972. Or, if you will, very much like a rabbi. Okay, that is the uniform of the controllers. It is also the uniform of the men in black. So immediately we have a connection between the extraterrestrial world, the UFO world, and the earthbound control system. That's a no-brainer right there. Okay. So everybody seated at the Council of 300 has one of these, let's call them men in black, directly assigned to them and working with them. And these beings, whoever or whatever they are, come and go from the planet. They come in mass. They're always here, but they come in mass, and they usually come through power stations, electrical power stations, or water treatment stations. Why that is, I don't know. I don't know. But that's how they appear. They're almost exactly like the men in black. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of spirits. I think that may be a quality of Fae and the Jinn, things of that nature, right? Right. This is more of that funny thing where the off-worlders seem to be affected by spiritual metaphysical things. Like, people say you could put a cross in front of a zeta gray and it'll repel them like a vampire. Mm-hmm. And you can also do the same thing with the Egyptian winged disc. And that symbol also repels them like they're fucking vampires, right? Which I think they are, at least the Zeta Grays, from how I understand the exo-effing politics of this complicated shit show of a realm we live in. I wouldn't have it any other way, though, because I think I'm winning. Funny that I think that, isn't it? I don't know. I'm able to laugh in this moment. It's all Dasein.
So, but to specifically answer your question, yes. The Council of 300 is the visible ruling council. Everything else that can be named is below it. And some things are way below it. So the Club of Rome is way below it. The Bilderbergers are way below it. The Bohemian Grove crowd is way below it. And, then you start to get into like religious affiliations like the Kabbalists and the Masons. And within this control structure, they're like the minions. But from the human perspective, us looking up, the Jews and the Masons run everything. No, they are the human agents, either conscious or unconscious. Let me repeat that, because that's an extremely important point. Many people participating in this are unconscious of the fact that they're even participating in it. You can be culturally assimilated to it if you're born into certain cultures, okay? So they can be conscious or they're unconscious. So at the level of the Council of 300, they would be fully conscious. There would be conscious interactions, okay? And so the Council of 300 is running the show. I could go on and on because you brought up The Light of Darkness, but not only would I change nothing in that book, it has become more and more relevant with each passing year. With each passing year, absolutely,
yeah. There's been many a time in conversation I've had the opportunity to bring up that book. I particularly enjoy the times I get a chance to bring up the demons, right?
Yeah.
Because that gets into what's going on with the Talmudic dark sorcery. Yes. Now you, Bruce, your fans over there, they know it about you. Anybody who's not been paying attention, I think one of our old interviews is up on this channel. I don't remember. So, but long story short is, you've got a deep spiritual metaphysical path of your own. I do a great talk about multiculturalism. Multiculturalism has definitely been a big part of what I am doing, right?
Yeah.
So we've got these three demons that are the head of the show. Maybe explain what's going on in the dark sorcery that's putting their presence in the jurisdiction of the Cabal.
Okay, so it really follows Milton's Paradise Lost, and I truly believe that was a prophetic book. Not, and also because of the time it was published too. I mean, so in 1666 you get Sabbatai Levi being declared the Messiah by the World Jewish Congress. He's living in Amsterdam at the time. And his group, which are apostate Jews, by the way, they invert everything in the Torah. If the Torah says fast, they feast. If the Torah says chastity, they go to homosexual orgies. This is Sabbatean Judaism, right? It's basically openly satanic Judaism. And so you've got him there in 1666 being declared the Messiah. But, I mean, the Jews are doing that every 100 years or so. They think their Messiah's come. And they're pretty sure now, this Chabad Lubavitch cult is pretty sure the Messiah's here now. But I don't know if they're missing the mark again or not. I really can't say. But now, also in 1666, John Milton publishes Paradise Lost. Now, Milton's motivation, Milton was used spiritually to get that book out, whether he was fully conscious of it or not. And the three main demons are Belial, which really centers on corporeal pleasure and perversion, Moloch, which is the child eater, and Mammon, which is the money. And those three demons, or as psychological or spiritual constructs, those three forces have been spreading in the world exponentially every century since the formation of the Bank of England, which was really the product of these Amsterdam Jews under Sabbatai Levi, through William the Orange and the conflict between the Stuart family and Cromwell, the fight for the throne, and then the Amsterdam merchant Jews managed to get a Dutch king on the throne of England for an indeterminate period of time. I can't remember how long it was, just a few years, I believe.
The 1666 period?
Yeah.
Are we at 66?
Yeah, well, it's closer to like the 1680s, but Sabbatai Levi and John Milton preceded it. And then you get the Bank of England, and I believe it's in 1684 you get the Bank of England. And the moment the Bank of England is formed, the movement towards Jerusalem and the construction of the Jewish mythology begins. Okay? So it's really, really kind of freaky the way the whole thing just... Once you tune into it, you can look at almost any half century from 1684 onwards, and you can see a chapter or laying down the metaphorical Roman road to get world Jewry back to Jerusalem. And it's all leading to the Third Temple, which the temple, if you're not aware, is kind of what you'd call in the same class of construction as the megalithic structures, like the pyramids and Stonehenge. And the construction is non-normative. It's a very magical the way the temple has to be built. First of all, the stone can't be cut. The way they used to do it in the past was there was a certain worm they would get that would chew through the stones. Very, very, very bizarre. And but now the rabbis have
a creature that like what would they put it on a stick like the Flintstones? Like, this is kind of fun. This is a fun thought for me. They had pet worms that were stone cutters.
Yeah, it was a worm that would chew through the stone somehow. I forget. Anybody can read up on it. Now, in our time, the rabbis have deemed lasers kosher, so the stones can be cut with lasers. So when they get the Alaska Mosque site, and they're going to get it because that's what this war is about. That's what it's all about. It's not about condominiums in Gaza. Okay, it's not about any of that stuff. It's about the temple. And the average 80-90% of Jews couldn't give a rat's ass about the temple. Okay, being Jewish to them is just living within their cultural footprint, maybe studying the Torah. I think over 50% of the Jews living in Israel are atheist, which, so it just becomes very curious trying to define who and what these people are. But there is a group of people, and this is the magical class, and the construction of the temple is absolutely critical to them. Now, when you get into studying the temple is quite fascinating, actually. When you look at it from above, it looks almost exactly like a central processing unit, like a computer chip. Okay?
Right.
And one of the things I studied and learned about writing Light of Darkness, as you know, Steve, is blood magic at the lowest level, which is just, a manasa, a small temple, a shed temple in your backyard in LA, and you're a Palomayombe Tata or a voodoo priest, and you go out there and you've got a little shelf with your idols on it. You got a chalkboard to write the script, the magical script that you speak to the spirit world in. Which, by the way, I'm not sure if you know this, but it's letter to number, just like gematria. All magical systems in the world are letter to number. That's so
Yeah.
it's a universal construct, like binary being a universal construct in code,
Right.
whether you're coding in Python or Java or C sharp.
Yeah, yeah. The single digit code is the primary magical foundation that works with the natural harmonics
Yeah,
in alignment, right? And this is why the Sephiroth, as you know it, is actually pure black magic,
yeah,
right? The universal tree of life is a nine centered figure that is it's symmetrical. It's got a crystalline structure. It's like looking at a piece of quartz crystal that's been evenly cut,
yeah.
right? And every node has its place. Nothing is left out like the way they leave out Doth, and everything. Yeah. So that works within a different net as well, because the flower of life
Yeah.
is on the wrong thing too, and the phi ratio is there's a different rate. Like there's a whole different thing that's kind of like on a base 9, base 12 sort of
Yeah.
system going on. But
So
I got a lot more to study to do before I can really dive into that.
so
Long story short.
in a lot of ways, the Sabbatean corruption invaded even the mystical elements of Judaism. So anybody studying the Kabbalah now, I mean, you may as well just be drinking arsenic. Seriously, okay? It is so toxic now, and the very best Kabbalah study you could get now is under a competent rabbi. But I think that the Kabbalah teachings they gave to the Gentiles through Masonry are completely corrupted and meant to absolutely sabotage the practitioner at a certain level, and which would explain why there's so many psychotic Masons when they get up into the higher degrees. Um, you know, and a lot of times, if you want to understand what I'm saying, maybe an illustration it would help. So when you look at Jimmy Savile, don't see a serial killer, see a rogue Kabbalist. Jimmy Savile was a rogue Kabbalist. He had Bibi Netanyahu on speed dial on his cell phone, was good friends with Bibi. Okay? And this religious magical system has invaded many aspects of the world's elites now. It's really coming out now everywhere. I mean, as I spoke to people on my show, Anna Lucas, who was a survivor of the Belgium cults, and basically the property of David Rockefeller in the early 70s, and pimped out to people like Pierre Elliott Trudeau as a child sex slave. She's come out and wrote a book now. I became aware of her when I wrote The Devil in Us, because I worked with the people in Belgium and they all knew her. And so this, when you see children being used that way in a complete disregard for the human race, really what it is the encroachment of this negative ET presence into a human body and a human commingling with a human consciousness. And the demons have really been the cover story, Steve. So people think it's mythological rather than literal, and it's actually quite literal. So, and most of the stuff going into the Kabbalistic and Masonic system is reptilian gray. But there's other very negative races as well, but mainly reptilian gray. So I'm all over the place. You got to recenter me with another question.
Yeah, no. That was Yeah, you think that was all over the place. That was like right in the pocket, very much like the kind of like listing of things I was like looking for for the breadth of what you
Yeah.
knew. And of course, um so then what is your take then on the different, like, what kinds of demon like or various spirits, angels, gods or whatever, like what's like an alien encounter that's happening in a paranormal
So the
sense? What's like not an alien, an actual entity?
Okay, so most of the demonic botherances people have are dead human beings. The Torah and the Talmud actually get this right. They call them dibuks, and a dibuk is a restless human spirit that didn't live well and had what we'd call a bad death, and is in this gap space between the physical and the astral. So they haven't really gone back into processing. The Chinese call them hungry ghosts. They just wander the earth, okay?
Right.
And they,
DIBUK, right?
yeah, that's right, DYBUK, yeah.
Okay.
And so this is going on as well. The demons are actually a class of being created by and working with and for God. The story of the fall is complete bullshit. It's an ET narrative masquerading as a religious narrative, and why wouldn't it be bullshit? It goes back to the Jews, right? It's not like you never hear Christ talk about the fall in the Gospels, do you? You know, it's very interesting how Christ didn't go over any of the core theology of the Torah, or by that time they would have had the Babylonian Talmud as well. I mean, the Pharisees and the Sadducees were in full swing. And he called, what did he call them? He called them the synagogue of Satan, right? Now, as you further yourself into this ET story, this is where it gets a bit controversial, and but there's no way to say this. Christ is also a part of the ET story. Christ was a Palladian construction. He was the product of an Ishwish, which is a Palladian holy person, and a human mating. This is the story that Billy Meyer gives. This is the story that Alex Collier gives from the Andromedans confirm what Billy Meyer said. And this is why the bloodline of Christ is so guarded. And it's to this day, it's still guarded. The bloodline of Christ is still guarded by the Mossad. Did you know that?
Interesting. Yeah. The Box Saga alleges to know the bloodline of Christ, and
well, that's why it's so interesting, okay? Because there's a genetic component to it. So anybody, this may speak to the Rh negative thing as well. I've never sought to make a connection. It just popped into my head. So don't ask me to go into any depth of that on that. But sure. Christ may have very well introduced the Rh negative, right? So the non-rhesus monkey gene, and so. But the bloodline is very well known by the Mossad, and they've been mapping the bloodline, following the bloodline of Christ since Christ emerged on the planet. And the reason for that was Christ was a human alien hybrid. Okay, I very rarely talk about these things because these days I'm more afraid of evangelical Christians than I am about Jews. I mean, they're more likely to attack you with pitchforks than the Jews for saying something that contradicts their dogma.
In the Box Saga, there was a man and wife who something happened, and like they kind of got kicked out of Udenma, right? So they got kicked out, and they went down south together, and then that was the Mary and Joseph of this Jesus, if you will, right? So there's these two having kind of like. I think they were just having a relationship, and like they weren't supposed to have a relationship by the way they needed to do things living up there.
Yeah.
So they came down this way, and they're coming in, and they're from the Hyperborean line, so they got cred to exploit, and they're gonna try and put their son on the throne of Rome. I think that's what their agenda was, right?
Okay.
And that was nothing to do with the king and queen of Udenma at the time. That was just them on the Box Saga. Basically, when when one of these Hyperboreans comes down and he causes trouble, they're on an ego trip, is what they simply say about it in the general sense, is that it's an
Okay.
ego trip. And it doesn't get into too much depth as far as I know, unless there's several angles to that story that hasn't been told yet, because the guys have to get it out in being asked questions or something. I'm not 100% sure what it takes to get all the answers out of a Box Saga,
Mm-hmm.
but if Michelle Merle's listening, please pop on in. Not tonight, but I mean on a Box Saga show.
Yeah.
I'm an open invitation for Michelle to come on. Anyway, yes, thank you. So
And
yeah,
and
we have
just one
the
other
Hungry
thing I'll throw in it just to bookend the Jesus extraterrestrial story. John Edmonds told me in no uncertain terms, and he would know, being the steward of Stardust Ranch and also a first-gen super soldier, and born to a connected family. You know, there was John, and then most of his other siblings were Harvard-trained lawyers, and they all live in New York. So John came from a very connected family, and he went through the programs, and he was a super soldier. But John told me in no uncertain terms that, and I wrote this in Stardust Ranch, black magic was given to the human race by the reptilians. So everywhere you look, what you think is a religious story is really an extraterrestrial story. Now, there are spiritual stories on the planet. There are stories of like Milarepa going into a cave for 30 years and coming out with the ability to fly after getting Buddhist initiation and meditating and repenting for his black magic. There's yogis in the Himalayas now over 400 years old. The human potential is amazing. They say we use about 5% of our brains. We use about 5% of what this skin suit and the psyche that goes with it can do. We are so dumbed down it isn't funny, and all of the core teachings that would have been given to us as the inhabitants of these bodies have been lost. We're like 5-year-olds trying to drive a BMW in these bodies. You know, and what fifth? What? We don't even know where the key goes or anything, right? So and the reason I say that is there's a lot of potential for spiritual growth in a human being. A human being can actually achieve God consciousness. That's something the extraterrestrials can't do. Okay? And it's unique to this 3D reality we live in, which explains a lot of the envy in the extraterrestrial races. And they do envy us. Okay?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah.
Recenter me, Steve.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. I was just going to comment on, I've talked a great deal about the imposter sky god situation, right? You know, where all of us had our quote sky gods, because it was how we were basically referring to the constellations, because of the process of astrology and how we kind of told that story to us. And back in the day, astrology was the women, history was the men. Now we can't even let astrology be the science that it is, because obviously we have to get people getting better at it and reframing why we're losing our predictions about why certain people get elected president and yada yada yada.
So to recenter very quickly, we're at the point where we're at now, where there's this incredible concentration of power in the Jewish world as a direct result of them being able to implement a lot of their systems 3.5 centuries ago. Like the money system is pure black magic. It's pure black magic, and it's extraterrestrial technology. And they were able to get that in, and they're able to game it, and they're we're able to use it to get to the point they're in now. So it's not that they're God's chosen people or they're smarter or more powerful than us. They've just been very well led by very good magicians who at critical points in history were able to strike positions that would grow into global institutionalization that have benefited them immensely. So we still use the basic usury system begun in England in 1684. Now remember, say what you will about the Vatican, they're also a corrupt institution. Did you, Cardinal Vigano, who was calls, he says there's a deep church just like there's a deep state. He got excommunicated about a month and a half ago, and he referred to the present papacy as the Berglioni, which is the Poppy Francis's birth surname is Berglioni. He's Argentinian, and he calls the present Vatican the Berglioni Sanhedrin. So they're all one thing now. It's not. They've all folded up. They've managed to get their people into all these institutions. I guarantee you, or I assure you, I can't guarantee you, but I assure you that the top 3 to 5 people at the Mormon Church get invited to the same meetings. Same thing with the Jehovah's Witnesses. It's probably the same thing at this point with Scientology, even though L. Ron Hubbard began as an adversarial to these people and was hunted by the CIA toward the last decade of his life.
Yeah. The aliens, they came to the Middle East first, with Sumer and then Egypt and such. And so that's why they reframed.
Well, in this period, I would only add that in this period, okay. But did you ever get around to reading the Galactic Historian, The World According to A.B.?
Yeah. I know that I read the last version that you get. I'm pretty sure I read the version. Yeah.
So I mean, this positive negative duality has always existed with different actors, and in bygone times, the Lemurians were the more, you'd say, aboriginal type livers. They lived very naturally, simple structures, but they were very powerful spiritually and psychically. And the Atlanteans were the evil black magicians. It's like the same thing repeating under. It's like Coke goes under and rebrands itself as a different name, but it's the exact same recipe, right? It's just, this is the principle. The principal lesson in this 3D reality is the extreme exposure to light and darkness is what a human incarnation is about, and you shouldn't run away from it either. If darkness comes into your life, study it, absorb it, learn it, okay? Because it's not to be feared, and you cannot find a single enlightenment story, including Christ's, in which the person does not go through a direct confrontation with extreme darkness. So for Christ, it's the 40 days in the desert. For Milarepa, it's the first 3 to 5 years of meditating in the cave, and his karma was so bad after murdering 40 people that he was just incessantly attacked by demons. And, Rumi talks about it in his poetry, right? You have to go through the darkness. And it's unfortunate that the present Christian system, led by the Catholics, infantilized the human race by making them all afraid of this and everything, and refusing to give up the notion of an eternal hell, which I think is about the worst sin on the planet now, is telling a group of people that they go to this horrible place forever. Hell regions exist on the astral, but they're not in. It's like going to jail. You serve a sentence and you get out.
But hell is the wrong word. Like hell is home. Hell's the original place. Like that's like the thing with the Box Saga. Hell was what we called the first the first place in the world, and because that's where Odin had everybody come and descend down from, and that's up at the North Pole, right? That's which used to be Helsinki, Finland, which is where it still keeps the name. That's hell. That's Helheim in Norse mythology, which had its meaning kind of changed. I think that the use
is fascinating.
I think the worst of the use the use of the word hall or hol in Old Norse is probably in the same thing because of vowels with hell, because Odin is in Valhall, and so this hole is where the Axis Mundi is that hits to the pole star, and so that realm was called that land was called Udenma. It was also known as hell at the very top of Udenma, at the
Yeah.
very center,
Yeah.
where it would also have the king's castle
Mm-hmm.
and things of this nature, right?
Yeah.
And so when you died, your soul would eventually go up, and it would go up to the north, and it would join kind of like the concurrence of souls around the Axis Mundi, which is the top of the torsion field of the planet. And then eventually you'd get thrown back down, and you'd find an incarnation through somebody. You'd find a man to come and reincarnate through whichever woman chose that man.
Steve,
That's how.
I generally don't podcast longer than an hour. It's a formula I've been on for about a year now. You want to just call this part 1 and pick up with another set of questions next Friday?
Yeah, I think that would be.
There's a lot for people to. We've only been on an hour and 5 minutes, but there's a week of contemplation in this podcast for people.
Oh yeah, there absolutely is. I hope I didn't throw off too many tangents. You were on the. This is great.
I find the Norse stuff really fascinating. I've been learning a lot about it from my friend Greg, the Teutonic shaman, and it's just absolutely fascinating, And
there's a tremendous amount of authors I still need to read, but I'll throw you some authors that'll help you, and some video makers that'll help you out there. Alrighty?
All right. Peace out, Steve.
All right. Yeah. All right. I'll see you later. Okay, guys. I'm going to...
Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Part 1 with Steve Travesty. Very interesting to do a podcast with an old friend that I started out in radio with. Steve lives in Connecticut, and very interesting guy. He's very much on his own path, and he's got his own way of seeing things, and it's very, very unique. So I hope you enjoyed tonight's podcast. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review, and this is the Talamanca Review.